Okay, so if I'm doing everything right, then this is going to be a series of screencasts in the end, which will be about implementing a Fever-compatible API for Nextcloud's News app. So what I want to do is I have this Nextcloud installation that has a news app, which is basically a feed reader. And I would really like to use it. Only problem though is that currently this does not support the Fever API. And I searched for Nextcloud News Fever API, and it seems like there was a feature request once, but in the end they ditched it, so it's not going to be implemented. And my idea is now to, at least in the first run, implement this as a separate NodeJS application. And in this first part of the screencast, I just want to do some exploration how this will work and how it's going to be implemented. So I already have the API documentation open. So Fever at least once was a self-hosted feed reader. This is discontinued by now, but somehow the API survived and is implemented in many feed readers you can find. And it's also implemented in Reader, which is the app I use to read news. So you can open the settings and you can connect your self-hosted Fever instance. And what I want to be able to do in the end is connecting a pseudo self-hosted Fever instance that as a backend just uses Nextcloud with the news app, so that it synchronizes all the news and all the groups and stuff over to my newsreader, both on macOS and on my iPhone. So, yeah, just having a brief look at the document, there is this part about authentication, which is strange, and I mean, they basically have the username, password, do MD5 fetch, which is great because it's broken like for 10 years. So, but anyway, it seems to work. And then in the end, they just do get and post requests with a strange format of query params to fetch groups and feeds and all kinds of stuff. So as main entities, I think we have groups, feeds, and there's a relationship between groups and feeds, and items, where items actually is like a single news item to read. Actually, I don't know how, I mean, this document might not be that reliable. And in the end, I just want to find out what Reader does in the moment when I try to connect. And therefore, I think we can just set up a small project that listens to all endpoints and just dump all the data that's sent and just have a brief look what this does, right? So let's create a folder called RSS Fever. I'm going to use Yarn, just initializing this project. And first of all, I will need Express. So let's install this. And then let's just set it up. I need app. I want this app to use. So since the Fever API will send URL encoded query params in the post body, we need this middleware. And then basically I want this thing to listen on port 3000. And we will create one middleware that will just fetch all the requests and dump them for now. We will need query and body. I think this should be sufficient. Okay. Just, let me open second terminal. And I will also add NodeMon that I don't need to stop and start the application all the time. So now we should have like basic server that's running and fetching all requests. Let's have a look what Reader does if we just try to connect it. I will use Fever, localhost port 3000, just some arbitrary credentials. I don't check them anyway right now. And it seems like this is doing something. So we get a request with this API query param, and it tries to provide the API key, which should be this credentials with a colon in between, hashed as MD5, just like the API suggests. And I assume, so there is the default is JSON responses. There's an optional XML, but I guess they use JSON by default. And for successful authentication, we're supposed to return two params, which is API version and auth, which is a Boolean integer, which is also really interesting. So let's just implement this. Let's just do res.json, and we will send API version is 1 and auth is 1. Just assuming that we have a successful connection. Now, when I try it again, as you can see, we already can add this, and now there's tons of requests executed by my newsreader. And for now, for this screencast, I just want to get to a state where I can specify like hard-coded news entry, and this is showing up here. This should be enough for today. So what I first want to do is I want to create a mock for each of those objects that we will need, because this is what we have to return in the end. So for now, just create like one group, which will have an ID and a title and a feed. A feed gets also ID, a favicon ID, which is, I don't know what this even is supposed to be. We need a title, test feed, URL, site not sure what this is, but no, just take the same one. Is Spark, also no clue what this is, just set it to 0. Last updated on time. So I think this property might be interesting. So this is a Unix timestamp, so let's just take the current one. This is it for our feed. Then we need this feeds group relationship, which is basically just one object that has a group ID and a feed ID. It's supposed to be a many-to-many relation. And we have this favicons. Contains an array of favicon objects which each have an ID, which is a positive integer, and a data, which is base64 encoded image data. Okay, we'll just take this example. Don't care about the icons actually. Whatever. this. And we get an ID and data. So last thing that I think we will need is this items. So I'm going to create one single news item. Also gets ID, gets a feed ID, gets a title, gets an author, gets HTML, which is probably what's rendered in the end. I mean, let's just wrap this like this. Gets a URL again. Gets is saved. I guess it's saved since we have it. Is read, nope. And created on time. We just use the same timestamp. Okay. I don't know what hotlinks is though, but for now I'm just going to ignore it. So the strange thing with this API is that there are not different endpoints for each of those entities to fetch, but there is one endpoint and you can just chain those query params together to get more or less properties in your response, basically. And for now, I think I will just always deliver everything, which should be the easiest for now, meaning that I will just append to this original response, and we will create groups, which is an array providing just our group. We will have feeds groups, which is array of this relation thing. What else? Feeds. So containing our feed. So this again has this feeds group. I think this should be there anyway. And we have this, sorry, we have this favicons and items, which includes the item, and total items, which is just one for now. I mean, let's just see what happens if we do it like this. So it's running again. If I just attempt to refresh, okay, we get our feed here already. It's not grouped. Maybe there's something wrong, but at least, I mean, we get it. So, but we also don't get any items from the feed. And I already previously took a look at it, and there is this sync section which says the unread item IDs and saved item IDs argument can be used to keep your local cache synced with the remote Fever installation. So if this is requested, there should be one additional member that returns you a comma-separated string with a list of positive integers representing the item IDs. This is a really interesting format. So I guess we have to implement this in order to get our posts back, because I already saw that there's this unread item IDs and saved item IDs already provided by Reader when it tries to fetch the posts. So let's just append this saved item IDs thing, and this is a string with only one value. This is really crazy. Okay, anyway. I think with some luck this should... Ha! Okay, great. So we have a feed here, and we have our post here. This even has like this preview in HTML, and So I think when I click it, it should also post something back to tell the API that it needs to mark this item as read somehow. So let's just click it. Yep. Okay. So it sends ID1, which is the ID of the item, which is this is really funny API. Okay. Mark item representing the ID type, mark as read, and then again the API key. Okay, so I think for the first step this should be enough, right? We have some rough prototype working, and it at least gives us some values. I guess this will be funny if we get more, but for now this should be okay. No. So okay. One thing I want to look at finally is I just want to compare the structure of the data that's stored in the Nextcloud News app with what we actually need to provide here, because I hope, so there's a chance that most of the data that we need here and all the properties that we probably want to set are already in the database, including this isRead and a saved flag. Just a little bit concerned about this time format if we have to convert this. So let's just have a brief look. As I showed you, I mean, I have this instance already running locally for development purposes, and let's just open SQL Pro and connect to the database. So we should have something like news here. Yeah, so we have folders. I guess this is our groups, which have ID and name, which for us is ID and title. This is good. And we have feed, which is feeds. So this is much bigger. But we basically have an ID as favicon. I will skip this for now. We have title, we have URL. We have the site URL, which I guess is either location or URL. Is Spark, no clue what it is. And last updated on time, I guess, is last modified, but this seems to not be, I don't know. Maybe this is some extended version. I don't know, we'll have to check. But in the end, this looks quite promising and should be relatively easy to adapt this to the format expected by Fever. Okay, then this should be it for now. And in the next screencast, we're actually starting our implementation. My plan is to practice some TDD in JavaScript. So we will implement this test-driven. And yeah, see you then. Bye.